Karnogu Yisrael Ledagdik, people are very particular, careful. The Hechshar Chayim. In other words, the Chayim is the place where they grind the flour. The way it looks like, the one that I saw many, many years ago, I don't know, is it has like a few floors. On one floor, they keep the kernels. And there's a chute over there. And they have sacks with kernels, and they pour it down in the shaft, and it comes onto the grinding stones. The grinding stones consist of two big stones, there's big stones, one on top of the other, and the kernels come in between the stones, and the stones rotate, and as it's rotating, it breaks open the kernel, and then later it goes into sifters. Sifters is in order to clean to clean it. What's the idea of cleaning it? The idea of cleaning it is when you bake matzah, to have two type of flours. Some flour is very white, and some flour looks brown. What's that? The idea is, as I mentioned before, the kernel has a little case around it, a yellow case. And so if, Marshall, you separate, when it grinds, when you separate the case that came ground from the flour, so you end up with white flour. So the matzah will be lighter. And if you don't do that, so then if you leave that part in the flour, then the matzah will come out darker. I think that's also the idea of what they call, today they have what they call whole wheat. What's that, whole wheat? Whole wheat means that it isn't only the white. The white flour itself isn't so healthy. The dark flour is healthier because it has in it what they call the
wheat germ.
The wheat germ. The wheat germ that today, in the stores, they sell wheat germ. You can go and buy about a jar of wheat germ. That's what's taken out of the flour, but that's really taken out the healthy part of the flour. So, and it goes through a few times. The sifting goes through a few sifts. All that got to be cleaned. So he says as follows, that you have to clean it carefully. Yeah, I remember that they clean between the stones. They pick up one stone from the other, and they go with a vacuum cleaner to vacuum out from whatever was done there before. V'kisim leichim chadashim. A kisim is something that they need for the
bags.
The bags, okay. U'b'mokum sheyesh talmidei chachamim heim ha'holchen el rechayim rashgiach. The mashgiach goes to the grinding of the flour. That time when I went, I told you about when I went with Rabbi Koff to New Paltz, to the watermill, many years ago. They lived here in Crown Heights, a year that was called the Narol Rav. If you remember the name Beres Shapiro, there was a Beres Shapiro where I live on President Street. Across the street from me is Free. And before Free, it was a Chassidish Shtibel over there. There was a Rav there, Rokeach. He had a big library, and Ber Shapiro married his daughter, and his father was the Nerola Rov. So he went with Kof that time to the grinding of the flour. להשגיח שיהיה הכשר קרות, ומוק נשאין תלמוד חכם, רואי לכל ירא שמיים שיהיה בעצמם, להשגיח על ההכשר. This is all skelet geworden, I told you, like, where everyone is making his own matzah, but today, it's not shaykh, everyone's going to go to the factory. The mitzvah yosem b'shucha, v'noigen ki hakemach harishon, shenitchen le'acher ha'hechsher, ein oichel noisem b'pesach. Because the Torah, maybe they got mixed in it, in the air or what, there was maybe something from a previous grinding. So the first grinding, you don't use that for Pesach. Im teichenim berechayim gam tvua l'susa. L'susa means washed wheat. If it's washed wheat, so then it really could be chametz already, because it was washed. So tzichel hafsek b'mechitza shrayisarev boy mino ovek ahu. You have to separate that, because it could be in the air. Like, if you when you buy a product today, there many times they advertise that it's made in a company where they make milk, or make peanuts. But even if they write it's made in a company where they make milk products, it's part of it. So why do they write a company that makes milk? Because people that are allergic to what they call to lactose, to milk products, so in the air of that company, like when you walk into the company, you could smell the milk. It doesn't mean that there's milk there then. So the same thing over here also. He says it could be it's in the air. There's from that flour, and it will come. But he says that if Moshe, let's say, the Alter Rebbe writes that if the flour, they make the flour, it's enclosed like with curtains or what. So then we're not concerned about it from the air that's going to come in. So then what he said here before, that you don't use the first flour that come out. The Alter Rebbe says you could use it. That was manazah. If it's enclosed, it's no problem. Saken kemel shenisrachach b'mayim. If water got onto a bag of flour, it depends. Imu b'mokem echad. If it's in one place, you see the place where this part of got wet. Ben shu adai rach ben shenishavish. If it's still wet or dried already, yecha is b'mokem hazeh b'yadav v'yorek and hashar umuta. In other words, like you chop the place where the wet part is, throw that out, and the rest, it didn't get to the rest. Rak zesh and ischacha also. Only what got wet is also. V'im nischacha become mekayim sheyevshe le'lasas kain. It's different. Water got different places of the bag. So then that's the case. Azai im adayin hulach yirakid es hakemach. You should put it again through a sifter. Umashe nisha alanapa pirurim zel levat chometz v'ashar muta. Because it has to say, if it got wet, if flour gets wet, it begins to crumble together. Azai flour is very loose, but if it gets wet, it begins to crumble. So if you begin to put it through a sifter, so the hard pieces are the pieces that got wet. So that will remain on top and wouldn't come through. So you know how to separate it. Again, yirakdenu. Again, you should do the same thing, because you want to make it, because if the Akbar ate from it, so the Akbar has saliva. So the saliva got onto the flour. So it's the same thing again. Avlim kran the shabish, le'mahani le'harkoda, because if it's really dry, so it will crumble. It will become soft again. B'chol hakemach also. Okay. B'yom shetochnos hakemach also rafoisen. You shouldn't bake matzah from flour that was ground today, that was made today. B'nei she'oz hakemach ucham, because the flour is still warm. It has a certain heat in it. U'mamayel hachmetz kishenaysim b'yezeh mayim. So every time, if you mix flour with water, it will become chametz if a certain amount of time passes. But if it's warm, then it becomes mamayel. It speeds up.
Is it a problem for matzah bakery? It's too hot?
Well, it's not too hot. But in the room where they bake it, that's not where the oven is. It's not the. Alken yisha acher hatchina chalapos meisreish. You should wait at least 24 hours. Hasakin shemanicham b'mesakemach. The bags, the sacks that they put the flour in it. Tay v'asaysim chadoshim. It's advisable to make them new ones. It means to open up the seams, and because we're afraid that maybe some old flour got stuck, it's still in the seam, it's stuck in there. And to wash them good. Efer means a soap. I mean, I'm all they used to use efer was like a detergent. B'shivsho v'chavita. Shivsha means rubbing it. Chavita means banging it. So everything will come out of it. Hasak and shemen. Also l'nir sak in kemach agabe behema. Now you have to bring the sack from the place where they ground it. You have to bring it to the bakery. So today, of course, you have trucks, but I'm always item. They use donkeys for this. So he says, also near sak in kemach agab behema, elim yesh of tachta. Not unless there's a saddle or a heavy piece of leather. The im lekein, if not, yischamen v'yisrachech min hazayah. The animal, when it's carrying a heavy load, the animal sweats also. So that sweat is a shayla if the zayah of an animal has a din of mayim or not. Some say it doesn't have a din of mayim, but there's some that say it has a din of mayim, so mele it will make chametz the flour. V'im efshe yizoresh gam k'shrei l'niach har b'saken zeh al gav zeh. When you pile it up, don't pile up many one on top of the other. Mipnei sha'yidei zeh mischamen v'yachvus b'risha. It will automatically, one will heat the other because there's no air coming in over there, so it'll begin to warm up, and it will become chametz when they make it into the dough. Okay. Now we'll go to Simon Kuf test. Is din hamayim.
It doesn't get no air in between. It's going to get.
In the Gemara Psachim stated there was a Tana that told the people that for baking matzah they should bring Mayim Shelonu1. So the people brought water each one brought a bottle of water. So he said, no, that's not what I mean, Mayim Shelonu1. Mayim Shelonu1 means Mayim that was sleeping, that rested overnight. Because during the day, the sun bakes on the water, and then late at night the sun goes under the water, and so it begins to warm up. So you have to take chayim that came at the time when the sun set, and not after at night. So he says it's a ein roshes hamatzis el b'mayim shelonu harayah, that they that they slept during the night. The hainu sheyishav oisam bein hashmoshes, he should take them bein hashmoshes. Bein hashmoshes means after the shkia. When we light candles 18 minutes before the shkia, and then that period between the shkia and seisek achavim, really even a little bit less than that. Some hold it's it's only 18 minutes, but between that period is Bein HaShmoshes. Now, we want that the water should be not used from the time that it was taken, it was drawn, till the baking, it should be 12 hours. So that's like a whole night went over it. So now he says, also, lorush behem ad orayim. You still have to wait till the next day, even though you have the 12 hours, but you have to wait till the next day. V'im halayla kotzer, v'ein yud shois. This could be like in Russia. In Russia, the nights are short. In other places, the nights are long. You have to wait 12 hours. The Amad Ara Neigim, the Welt 40, Shemiyad Ba'or Hayom Loshin Ima Mayim Shelonu. Right, early in the morning they start working. Av Shadayim Abu Yud Beis Shoes. And he says, "V'av sheyesh lahem amashe yismoichum," even though halachically they have what to rely on, avorav apaiskim machmirim b'zeh, that has to be 12 hours from the time. So, Mashal, now Mashal they're going now to take the Mayim Shelonu. 12 hours will be 7 o'clock in the morning. So you can't start, or 7:30 in the morning. Because you can't start before 8 o'clock. That's why they start 8 o'clock. So you have 12 hours. If he doesn't know exactly when Bein HaShmoshes is, Yakdim Tzas, so start a little bit earlier. Because till the sun sets, it's still baking on the water. So when the shkiyas the chama, it's no longer on the water. So v'aminig l'sanin es hamayim. The minig is to put the water to a filter. U'chasaysam, and to cover them. U'tzrichun amidam b'mokum kar. You have to keep them in a cool place. U'keshehu noisam b'yoyim Rubayis, when he carries them to the place where he stored the water, to bring it to the house where he's making the matzah, Yizor Shalei Yoveh Aleim HaShemesh. You should see that they don't get exposed to the sun. Yochel Risha B'pam Achaz L'kam Yomim, Avu HaMitzvah Risha B'shvil Kol Yom V'Yom B'ftei Atzmai. Don't use a klei cheres. Now the problem with a klei cheres is, why can't we kasha a klei cheres? Because the Gemara says, "Hatayra heida al klei cheres sheina yaitzim midafya la'ilum." In other words, the klei cheres absorbs. There's a pasuk in Chumash. We just recently learned it in Chumash. We said the pasuk klicheres eshe yivashu ba yishava. Why klicheres eshe yivashu ba yishava? Because you can't kasher it. Other came we could kasher. So being that the klicheres always has absorption in it, so it even gives out a little bit of that absorption. So therefore, he says you shouldn't use a klicheres like a fill who show pesel, even so pesel dicker. Ella im kain hu mitzupa, not unless it's glazed. I must explain that the dishes that we have today, many of the dishes, there's a shaila. If you buy a set of dishes, you have to table it or not. So what's the shaila? You have to table it or not? Because the dishes itself is a klicheres, and there's a glazing on top of it. So Molgezeiten, they used to make a heavy glazing. So it gets the din of a klis chuchas, and a klis chuchas needs tvila. But if it's not the ones that we buy today, a set of china, it's a very thin film of glazing. So it's a shaila if that's considered that's when they get the tvilas kelim. The kucheres yoshin she'ena mitzupah, eina hida mitzvah, be'enga shanas ha-mitzvah. It's not a hida mitzvah, but really, what could be is before Pesach, remember. So how much could it take out? But still, we don't want to have even a mashahu, even though Pesach before Pesach is bottled and everything, but we don't want that. Hanahares b'mei Nisan, the rivers in Nisan, because I'm all excited. Where did they get the water? They went to the river to get the water. So al pi haroiv hen yoseh karim min habe'eres. The bed is enclosed, and the water is down on the bottom with walls around it. So it's a little bit warmer than the water that's in the river. V'alkein yishav min hanor. Therefore, it's better to take from the nor, because the nor it's colder. We don't want water that should have any warmth in it. Ach kapom hanahares gadayim me'afshar shlagim ve'enim karim kol kach. In certain seasons, the nor, which is out exposed to the public, so the snow that gathered in the winter, the snow begins to melt. So that is already a little warmer water. So at that time, take from the bear. Because the be'eres is at that time is cooler than the naharis.
City water, it has a din of a be'er.
There are people that, what do they do in the big factories? They use city water. I don't know B'chal, if the medayik, I'm not familiar with the... Over here we take from, they made a Mayim by 770. So they're taking from, it's like a well, I mean, but it...
Before that, they used regular water from the city.
Huh?
Before they made that well, they used regular water from the city or something. Faster, there was no other water.
Lo yeshivam ayidei goy, el ayidei Yisrael. That the reason is because it has to be l'shem matzos mitzvah, and just like we read by grinding the flour, by cutting the wheat, has to be l'shem matzos mitzvah, and the goy can't be mechaven. That a shaila if it's helped Yisrael emet agabov or not. So he's saying, so over there's an eitzah, like I said, you could sit on the tractor when they cut the wheat. But over here, that's difficult to do that. So therefore he says that you shouldn't send a goy, dafka a yid. Okay, we'll stop over here.